This is Talking Drupal, a bi-weekly chat about web design and development by a group of guys with one thing in common: we love Drupal. Recorded live on Wednesday afternoons in a Google Hangout. Visit us at talkingdrupal.com. This is Wednesday, June 29th, 2016, and we're having episode 123, Paragraphs. Welcome, guys.
Good afternoon.
A long-awaited topic, paragraphs.
Paragraphs.
We've all used it. I think we all like it. So it'll be interesting today to talk about it. And with us today, as usual, is John Picozzi from Oomph.
Good afternoon. Very excited to hear about Nick's skydiving extravaganza. So I'm just going to go, we can switch right to him because I'm more interested in hearing about his skydiving extravaganza.
That's news to me, so I'm interested to hear about it as well. So Nick, let's hear about yours. So Nick Laughlin from Enlightened Development. He sounds like he had some sort of skydiving extravaganza and not incident, which would be good, right?
Yeah, good afternoon. Looking forward to talking about paragraphs as well. But yeah, actually had a fairly adventure-packed weekend. You know, we saw Curious on Friday, which is a Cirque du Soleil, which if you like that kind of thing, is fantastic. And then Saturday, my wife and my mother-in-law and I went skydiving at a Pepperell. So I think we jumped from about 10,500 feet. It was a lot of fun, really great. I'd done it before, but it was both their first times. And Sunday we went sailing in the Boston Harbor. So it was definitely... and sailing is a lot more active than I think a lot of people would think.
You put new meaning to land, sea, and air.
Yeah, we kind of hit all three. So it was definitely a good weekend. Very adventure-packed. And
So
skydiving is definitely...
I'm interested in both of those things because my daughter's 18th birthday was just on Sunday. And we bought her a skydiving package for her 18th birthday. That's what she wanted to do.
Okay.
So, any advice there?
Check your chute.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Actually, you don't
follow
you don't
instructions.
You don't go anywhere near that chute.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends. Is she doing a tandem or is she doing the line pull? Because I've only done the tandem where you jump with somebody.
I'm not sure actually.
Yeah, so I'd say
I didn't organize it.
I mean, I'd say the best advice, like John said, listen to what the instructor says. Have a lot of fun. You know, keep your feet up when you're landing. That's landing, getting your feet down is where you're gonna get hurt.
Time out. Line pull? You mean like you jump out of the plane, the line pulls your chute, and then it opens?
Yeah. So there's two different kinds. So if you're not certified to jump solo, which takes something like 50 jumps inside of 3 months, you either have to do what's called tandem jumping. So there's the guy strapped on your back, hooked into you. You jump off with him. That's what I did. He let me pull the cord. He let me control the chute. But he's the one that's actually kind of running the show.
He's the one skydiving. You're just along for the ride.
Essentially,
yeah.
Right, okay. And the other option is, I don't know the actual word for it, but there's a line attached to the ripcord and attached to the plane. So when you jump out, when you get about 50 feet away, it automatically pulls. Obviously, the tandem is better because you get that free fall. Actually, I would say the advice that I have is make sure that the setup that she has padding on the thighs, and make sure that padding is in place, because when that parachute pulls,
should also watch the video. You should also watch the YouTube video of the grandma that almost slips out of her harness. I feel like everybody should watch that before they go skydiving.
Great.
No, it's great fun. It's a lot of fun. Well worth it. Pricey, but well worth it.
Right. So, and then on to your second adventure for the weekend. You said you went sailing. Tell me more about that. That's really more in my boathouse a little bit.
Yeah, I went sailing. A colleague of ours, Kay,
okay.
Has a couple of sailboats, and so we went to, I think it was, I don't know exactly how big it was, but maybe 20, 30 feet, and took it out of the marina right on the bay, and then took it out to one of the islands out there and spent the afternoon sailing around. So it was
good.
A lot of fun. Decent win. A couple of times died off, so of course you kind of coast to a stop, but it's a lot of fun.
Oh, good. All right. So I guess we can maybe get a little more boring and now talk about paragraphs.
Well, I think we get tips first, right?
Oh yeah, let's jump to tips. I should follow the agenda, shouldn't I? So I'll start since I'm the first one on the list. So this is not really a tip; it's really more of a comment. But I'm working on a project recently, and it's not using Sass or anything. No compiling tools for CSS, and it was just a pleasure to just work in plain old CSS for a little bit. And I mean, once you start using tools like Sass and stuff, you actually think you write better CSS later when you go back to some plain old CSS file. So it's just more of a comment of it's a nice thing to actually go and just edit a CSS file and just see the changes show up and not worrying about compiling and all that.
It could almost be its own show topic. Is like his Sass overcomplicated CSS.
Well, tell me, how many times did you refresh the page and have everything break because you actually wrote nested CSS or put a variable in there?
I didn't actually do that, believe it or not.
Last time I wrote actual CSS, every time I wrote something, I did that.
You're like, why doesn't blue work? Blue works everywhere else.
Yeah, I didn't find myself doing that, but it certainly just was it was like a throwback, not like you're throwing all that far back, but it was sort of a little bit of old school, and it was just a nice change. So, you know what? I was wondering if Sass is sometimes overkill for projects, and there's nothing wrong with maybe.
Or in general.
Yeah, no, not in general at all, or just maybe just throwing some simple CSS up there, and it was kind of nice.
I don't know. I think that would be an interesting show topic. Maybe we should put that on the short list because I don't think it is. I can't. Yeah.
You don't think it is what?
I don't think it's overkill ever.
No, I don't either.
So.
Yeah, I don't think it's overkill at all, but it was just nice to have a little bit of a change and just sort of go back to actually looking at the results of what Sass gives you and coding it yourself. So kind of fun. You have to kind of remember how to write the syntax properly instead of just nesting things inside of Sass. So it was a fun thing to do. So John, you want to mention something about Composer, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. I have had the pleasure over the past couple of weeks of working on a Drupal 8 site and working with our some of our DevOps team and kind of creating a really solid Composer as well as some other technologies driven deployment. And Composer, as of I think Drupal 8.1, was the dependency manager for Drupal, and using Composer require to require modules instead of Drush DL is a really cool and interesting way of doing things. Basically, what we're doing is we are updating our Composer JSON file. And then when that gets to our dev server, it's actually being built out on the dev server using that Composer JSON file to download all the dependencies to the server. So you're not actually pushing module code into your repository, which is super awesome. And then Composer does a little bit of a better job giving you like meaningful error messages. Better error messages than I would say Drush does. So I would say if you haven't checked out Composer yet, or you're still using Drush, check out Composer and how all that works, because it's pretty useful.
So would you be replacing Drush in your with Composer completely, or just in terms of
No. So Composer's a package manager, so it's only really going to help you manage your module dependencies and your other dependencies for your project. So you'd still need Drush to clear caches and do other Drushy things, but Composer is definitely handling that module management piece for you.
It's funny, I was looking at a module recently, and I cannot remember what it is that I installed, but the install instructions were to use Composer, not to use Drush.
Yeah, address module. Address module actually has that right on their page. They say you need to install this via Composer, and that's actually going to be more common, I think, as modules start using other libraries and requiring other libraries. That's the reason Address asks you to use Composer, because it actually goes out, it downloads the Drupal module, but it also downloads all the other dependencies for you as well.
Nick, you have something to comment about form values.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I think a couple weeks ago, I've been doing a lot more Drupal 8 work, and so I think my tips coming up are going to be about Drupal 8. And one of the fairly big changes, it's probably makes things a lot more consistent in the form space, is that in Drupal 7 you would create a variable or an array of form values and just set it to the form state values key. And in Drupal 8 that no longer works. You now have to use the method getValues. So if you want to get the form values that are currently in your form, you have to use the method getValues with the capital V. And then that will populate an array of all the values of your form.
Right. Great. I have some Drupal 8 questions for you after this phone call, if you're still free.
Yep.
Great. So let's move on to paragraphs. So what is paragraphs? Anyone want to take a stab at that?
Paragraphs is...
It's a module. Let's start there, huh?
Yeah, it's a module, and it essentially gives you the ability to build these things called paragraph bundles. And what a paragraph bundle is essentially a field collection. So it's a group of fields that you can build into this bundle, and then through paragraphs you can actually add these bundles as different options to a content type, and allow a user to basically reuse them. So, a good instance of this is if you had like an image that had text and a button along with it, and you wanted to put 3 of those on a page. Well, instead of creating 6 fields, or in this case, I guess 9 fields on your content type, you could create one paragraph and use this paragraph bundle 3 times. So it essentially gives you the ability to do something that fields collections kind of does, and place a collection of fields on a content type multiple times.
Yeah, so I think that's actually a good point, and something that we should differentiate right now is the difference between field collections and paragraphs. So field collections and paragraphs.
Let's also not try to make the assumption that someone listening knows what field collections is. By the way.
Yeah. So field collections is exactly what kind of John described. It's a way to have multiple fields tied together as a group. So field collections and paragraphs are both entities that you can then place on a content type or on another entity. So it gives you the ability, like John said, or common use cases for, like a board of directors, where you need to have each member needs to have a picture and their title, and then the username associated with it. And for whatever reason, the title can't be on the user profile. So it allows you to have a collection of fields together. Now, the big difference between paragraph and field collections is that paragraphs, I think, came around after the entity API was completed, and field collections was a little bit before that. So the paragraph module integrates with all of the usual entity API systems. So you can very easily perform operations on them just like with nodes. Whereas with field collections, it doesn't work as well. Another point that differentiates them is the user interface. The user interface for setting up paragraphs is a bit cleaner than field collections, and it also gives you a lot more control over which paragraph bundles are available for a particular field.
I also find that paragraphs is a lot. This is going to sound silly, but a lot less buggy than field collections.
Yeah.
I find that field collections can often cause you headaches when you try to do things really simply, like use field collections and views and so on and so forth. So the long and short of it is, I tend to go out on a limb here, but I think paragraphs is a much better field collection.
There's no reason to use both of them, and if you're starting a new project, there's no reason to use field collections. I mean, paragraphs fairly well solves the same problem in a much cleaner fashion.
The other thing that I like about it too is you can have multiple bundles on a content type, and we'll talk more about kind of use cases later on. But you can have a couple of different field configurations that are reusable and sortable by the user on the front end. So it really gives you a lot of customizability that you may not have with other modules or just regular fields.
So some of the reasons that you would go after paragraphs in the first place is it gives you the ability to provide a content administrator with the flexibility of creating a page that has different structured content on it and choose as many different kinds of things as they want on a single page. So they may want to have a section that has an image and text to the right, and they want 3 of those, and they want one section where there's an image to the left, an image in text on the other side, and they may want to throw a carousel of images in between there. They can reorder those any way they want, and they can do all of that in a single edit page on a node on the website. I mean, that is a lot of power and flexibility. So you can create one content type that has lots of different views of the way it looks in the end, and a lot of different kind of content in it, based on sticking a single paragraph field on a node and allowing users to add multiples of those. So there's a ton of flexibility, and in the past, if you didn't use field collection or didn't use paragraphs, you'd be having the user either put a lot of this stuff into the WYSIWYG editor, or you would be building a lot of complex engineering with multiple content types and blocks and all kinds of stuff that you were embedding in pages, and paragraphs has really simplified that. So if you're familiar with WordPress, it kind of is like, and this is a stretch, but it's kind of like taking a widget in WordPress and dropping it on a page and filling in the fields.
It's interesting because I would actually often call paragraph bundles widgets. And that's really confusing to people because we're a WordPress shop as well. And in Drupal 7, widget had no real meaning, but in Drupal 8, you actually have something that is called a widget. So now you have to be careful of the terminology that you use. But yeah, I tend to use that all the time. You can like widgetize your pages and allow people to kind of drop things wherever they want, which is great.
And while paragraphs is a fantastic module, it's a horrible name. I mean, the word paragraph doesn't really describe what this thing is and the capabilities of it.
It took me a very long time to discover it. It took me a long time to discover the module, and I almost didn't use it when somebody told me because I'm like, that it's just a terrible name.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody now knows what it does and how powerful it is, but I tend to agree. Paragraphs is not the best name. Possibly a good opportunity for some sort of raffle or something would be to come up with a new name for paragraphs.
So one of the biggest benefits of using paragraphs is for the admin side. I mean, the content administrator benefits the most from this, really. Other than, it's easy for developers to put some real creative pages together and give a lot of power to the content administrator, but they really benefit from this tool a lot. It's a much simpler experience for them.
The nice thing is you get to still have validation of what kinds of content the end user can put in the site, but you give them the flexibility to sometimes choose, how that gets put in. So an example that I've used is for an example where I've used the paragraphs fairly successfully in the past was I had a client that had a piece of content that had a gallery attached to it, and usually the images for that gallery were uploaded to a Flickr account, and they just used the Flickr module and the gallery ID to display that gallery. Occasionally, however, they didn't own the rights to those images, so they weren't allowed to re-upload them to Flickr, but they were allowed to host them directly on the website. So in those cases, they wanted to just use a gallery, so upload 5 or 10 images and have it use FlexSlider or something to create a gallery. In the past, you could always do this with Drupal 7. The problem was you would have Drupal 7 without paragraphs. The problem is you would generally have two different, options, either Flickr or the other one. You have to trust the user to use only one and not the other, and put some complex rules in the views to get it to show the correct one. However, with paragraphs, the user can only put Flickr or the gallery. When they create the content, they get to choose which one they need. They make the choice, and then they enter the data as necessary. And then because it's the same field for the display options, you're just, it's automatically handled on the back end. So it's a really powerful tool. It gives, like I said, it gives the end user flexibility on how their content is entered and displayed, but it gives the site owner consistency in what to expect.
So setting up paragraphs is pretty straightforward. It's understanding that there is now like a new kind of structure that you need to deal with.
Yeah. I mean, the interface is very similar to adding a content type because it's an entity. So you have the paragraphs page. You can add a new paragraph bundle, which is like adding a new content type. And then each bundle has fields associated with it. So you can, in my case, for that particular project, I would have had 2 paragraph bundles, one called Flickr that had a field on it that just accepted the Flickr gallery ID. And then I had another paragraph bundle called Media Gallery that just had a multi-value image field on it that was then displayed with FlexSlider.
You also want to be aware that they have their own displays as well. So they have their own sets of fields, but they also have their own displays. So you have to make sure it gets a little bit tricky, especially when you get to the content type level. If you are using a paragraph bundle within another paragraph, you could be seeing a label on your content type that is actually not part of the content type. It's part of the paragraph bundle. So
yeah, you can.
All right, well, slow down. You just threw something out there, John. Do you realize what you just threw out there?
Inception.
Yeah. So a bundle within a bundle, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's first talk about what do you mean by a bundle? So when we create, and then let's talk about a bundle in a bundle, because that's where this kind of gets really, really powerful and a little bit crazy almost. So right?
Crazy is a great word for it. So a bundle. What's a bundle? A bundle is essentially a collection of fields that are going to then be used as a grouping. So you have a bundle. Nick's example of a staff member, right, is a pretty good example. So a staff member bundle would have a headshot, the person's name, the person's title, right, maybe a phone number or something like that. So those would all be fields in your paragraph bundle. Now, when you apply that bundle, there are 2 ways you can go about it. You can go to your content type. You can add a paragraph field and select that bundle as that's going to be the bundle that this paragraph uses. Or say you had multiple reasons to use that person, right? Say you wanted to group people into some sort of organization and you wanted to add like an organizational logo and some other stuff, you could actually build an organization bundle with the organization's name and logo. And then on your content type, you could actually add, or you could actually make another bundle that merged those two things together. So now you have these two disparate bundles merged into one bundle that then an admin can add to a content type to use on a basic page or whatever their content type is. So that's what I mean by you can have a bundle within a bundle.
So just to clarify, I think, and maybe I just didn't hear it clear from you, what I think you're saying is when you add fields to bundle A, one of the field types could be another bundle. Another paragraph bundle. So, is that what you were trying to say?
Yeah. So So you have the ability to add a paragraph field. Again, it's an entity. You can add a paragraph wherever you want, and in that paragraph you can select other bundles. So you could have, in theory, one paragraph that combined two other paragraph bundles.
So there's something jumping out to me that is really related to our last show, 122, which was taxonomies versus entities. So if you haven't listened to that show, go check it out. But it's something that's jumping out when the example we're using right now, which is, John, that you used, which was you might have an organization bundle, and then within there you have people. Why would that not be content type on its own? Why would we create these as paragraphs?
It totally should be a content type. Okay. It was just kind of following up on Nick's example. A lot of times you'll use you'll use bundles within bundles. Let me give you an actual real world example that I'm working on right now. Yeah. I actually have a home page, and the home page has these what we're calling cards, and each card is essentially an image, some text that overlays that image, and a button that overlays that image. Mm-hmm. So the look of this is that you have 3 cards on the top area, and then 2 cards on the bottom and a web form. So you have basically 6 cards, right? One of which is a web form. So what I did is I built a card paragraph bundle, and then I actually built another paragraph bundle that was 4 cards plus web form. So what you do there is in that 4 cards plus web form bundle, you allow the user to add the cards, as many cards. You can limit how many cards they can add. So they can add 5 cards, and then the last option is actually a web form. So they have a field in there that says, what web form do you want to show? And it's an entity reference. So this is actually on a basic page content type. So they can add this to any basic page that they want. That's another example at which you wouldn't necessarily use a content type for that because it's really just media and page layout management as opposed to actual content management. But that's where paragraphs and multiple bundles can come into play.
Yeah, and I want to circle back to Stephen's original question on why that would be a paragraph and not a content type, because you said that it should be a content type and it shouldn't. Here's why. In this particular use case, it was for committees. So a person could be on more than one committee, and these people never logged into the website. So they needed to have a picture, a name, an email address, and a phone number. So it was actually 2 paragraphs nested within each other. The first paragraph held the person's picture and the person's name, so that could be reused across multiple committees. And then the second paragraph held their email and their phone number, because depending on the committee, they may have a different email. So they may have, committee@gmail.com, and then another email for committee B@gmail.com. So the reason why that wouldn't be a content type is because with paragraphs, you have the ability to update or edit excuse me, the entity directly on the node edit page. Whereas if it was a content type and an entity reference, you'd have to go to a completely different form to edit that information. So it kind of gives you the ease of use of just editing the content that's reused elsewhere sometimes in one place without having to go somewhere else. If there's a typo in the person's name or you need to update their headshot, you don't have to like go searching for it. You just go to a committee that they're on, edit the committee, and you can update their picture. But you can.
I have a much different approach for that, but we're gonna stay on the paragraphs topic.
Sure, but and I think that the point is a real relevant one. Is like I think in general, general Drupal background, often when you come to a staff page or an organization page, you tend to think of it as content types because you're reusing the content in other places. And we just did this on a site a few weeks ago. There's a staff page for the website, and that content isn't used anywhere else. We would have put this page in a WYSIWYG editor if we didn't need some specific formatting with it, and it's a perfect case for paragraphs. You got a first name, you got a last name, you got an image. They're all going to show up, and it's never used anywhere else. I mean, that's a case where paragraphs is perfect.
Yeah, I agree with that, Steve. I think my first approach would definitely be content type with views. And then I think my definitely second approach would be paragraphs way before I just gave somebody the ability to use the WYSIWYG. One thing that's really awesome about paragraphs, and we touched on this a little bit earlier on, is you have the control. So you give people fields that they can just enter information into. They don't have to worry about adding classes. They don't have to worry about selecting headings. They don't have to do any of that. They just have fields that they drop the information to, and then you have the ability to style the output however it needs to be styled. And something I actually did just at the beginning of the week was using paragraph templates. So paragraphs actually have a great templating engine behind them as well. I'm using Drupal 7, paragraphs with Drupal 7, so templating is a little bit different than it would be in Drupal 8. But yeah, they have some templates you can pull in for single items versus multiple items, and then also you can get like display specific. So it does allow you for a lot of flexibility with your output.
Yeah, it gives you. Yeah, as you said, it gives multiple layers of templates again. So you can do a template per paragraph bundle, for paragraphs in general, or specific displays. Or I think you can even get to specific implementation. So if you have a paragraph on one content type and a different content type, you can format those differently. So it's pretty nice.
There are a number of supporting modules as well for paragraphs. I'm not sure if you guys have used any of them. One of them is Paragraph Pack, which is a module that creates a number of paragraph bundles for you that are typical to use out of the box. Kind of. So when you install the module, you get all of these predefined bundles that you can use. So, and just to clarify one more time, bundle, you can, when you install paragraphs, you don't have anything, and you need to define paragraphs in order to use them. This module will give you a set of default ones to start with, and it might be like a little image left, text right. I mean, some carousel. I think it's got some carousels in it, and things like that to sort of get you moving in the right direction with paragraphs.
It's interesting.
There's a few more out there. I don't know if you guys have used any of these. There's classy paragraphs, which allows you to define some classes that users can assign to a paragraph for styling purposes. And I think there's more than one module that does this. Paragraph IDs, I think, does the same thing, same kind of thing. I'm not as familiar with that one.
Man, there are some great modules in here. I did not know any of these existed. I honestly have just been using like core paragraphs, and it puts out some pretty, I'm going to call it beefy code. So there are a lot of classes in there that you can hook into, and a lot of things that you can do that you don't necessarily have to customize them a whole lot. But I can see the classy and ID modules being really useful to the front end devs out there.
And there's also I'm gonna look up the name of it, but I know that Isovera worked on a fairly um, powerful customization of the paragraphs module that allows for um, giving even more control and switching around the layout. I mean, it's essentially I'll have to look it up, but it's essentially giving you almost like an internal panels layout without the panels overhead. So I'll look for that and post it in the show notes, but it was pretty cool.
It's the other nice thing that you mentioned about paragraphs is layout. You know, you have a lot more ability to lay things out, and I know we're talking about, you know, it being very customizable, but you also kill a lot of overhead of having views and views blocks on all of these pages, because now you have the ability to do certain things, similarly to like the staff page, right? You have the ability to do that all within that content type and within that set of fields. So you don't have to load in a view block and run that query, and you get a little bit of a performance boost from that, I would imagine.
You know, paragraphs is one of those, and it hasn't actually been around very long. I'm trying to figure out, looking back here through the release notes of how long this has been around, but I don't think it's been more than a few years. Does that sound right to anybody? And this almost feels like something that could end up in core at some point to me.
I was actually just thinking that, as you started to say it, I'm like, this is on the same level as views, I think, or at least it's going to be down the road. I can't imagine. I'm building 3 or 4 websites right now, and I think out of those 3 or 4, 3 of them are going to be using paragraphs.
Yeah.
And actually, that's a lie. We actually just added paragraphs to the last one as well for a marketing landing page.
And by the way, I just found that module. So it was a talk given at NedCamp last year, I believe, by Chris Smith from Isovera. So I'll post, and the name of the module is Paragraphs Extra, which is actually a sandbox module at the moment. But you can certainly get some ideas from there if you're not going to be putting that on your actual site. So I'll post the slides or a link to the session there, as well as a link to the module in the show notes.
Okay, anything else we want to say about paragraphs other than go check it out if you're not using it?
Yeah, so I think one thing I would like to kind of harp on a little bit is the use cases. We talked about a couple of different use cases throughout the show, and I think one of the most prevalent or interesting use cases for this is that marketing landing page. And subsequently, I am going to be giving a talk about that same topic, paragraphs and marketing landing pages and whatnot, at Design for Drupal. But I think the use of paragraphs to give the marketing team that flexibility can make everybody's life a ton easier. I mean, the idea of like the marketing people coming to you and being like, "Hey, we need to do this really unique layout." In the past, we'd be like, oh, God, so that's going to have to be another content type, and we're going to have to set up all these fields, and, it's going to be really complicated, and it's going to be a pain. Now, with paragraphs, we don't necessarily have that issue, right? We can give them we can give them the ability to add paragraphs and add these quote unquote widgets to a marketing landing page in any order that they want, and it really gives a lot of flexibility to those content types and to those departments. So I think there's a lot of value in that.
And I think I've got another use case that I have that's fairly interesting that shows a lot of the power behind paragraphs. So I'm sure most people listening to the show are somewhat familiar with the new picture element, where you can swap out, based on the size of the screen, what image actually gets loaded. And there's a similar issue that happens when listening to media, like audio files. So if somebody's listening on an Android phone, a stream needs to be a certain format versus an Apple phone or a desktop or something else. So I was able to use there was this was a site rebuild. The previous site just used 4 different fields. There were text fields, and they just did a lot of there's a lot of logic in the templating files.
Logic, yeah.
In order to get that all switched over. And with paragraphs, so I was able to just create one paragraph bundle that had 4 fields on it. There were links to the 4 different types of stream that you could have. I think they did Windows Phone, Android, iPhone, and just default, which would be desktop generally. And then there was a little bit of JavaScript to detect what device the person was using. And then there was one template file with about 5 lines in it that just swapped out the stream URL that was passed to the user. So it ended up being taking, I think they had 200 or 300 lines of complex and somewhat not working code in the template files to one small template file and about 10 lines of JavaScript. So it's definitely, you can definitely use it for a wide variety of use cases. It's not just cut and dry, and I think that really lends its case towards at some point being put in core, because it's not something that just works for one particular use case. It's a very, very broad application and gives a lot of power.
Yeah, so sort of jumping on John's point, and he was talking about this in terms of a marketing page, but really I think it's in the power that someone on a marketing page has, but you could take that and apply it to your entire site. Like, in a lot of site builds, you typically do is you say this page is this kind of layout, this page is this kind of layout, this page is this kind of layout. When you have the flexibility of something like paragraphs, like, the user can decide which page is which layout at any point in time and change it. Almost. It's really sort of interesting.
I agree with that. I will say that, the old adage, with great power comes great responsibility.
Sure.
I still think you got to look at your content structure and make sure that what you're doing makes a lot of sense. And that's why I say, relegate these things to marketing landing pages, or have a landing page content type that's a little bit that's expected to be different on every occurrence of it. I think having this just as or having these features as just a general basic page approach could be dangerous, where every page on your website looks different and the user doesn't get any real continuity. So, I caution people not to go crazy, but I think it can solve a lot of problems for admins and for people that are creating content.
Yeah, you still need to architect the site. It's not.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's
this isn't a replacement for intelligence and good decisions whatsoever.
Exactly.
But it does
not a silver bullet.
It gives it gives some power and capability in a very easy way that we generally didn't have before.
Okay.
All right, let's move on to our module of the week. We have email registration module.
Say what?
Anyone ever heard of that before? Maybe not. So what email registration module does, it allows you to let a user create an account and log in to an account with just an email address. So they never create a username. So what happens in the background when you install this module, it takes the user's email address and creates a user ID out of it. So it would strip out all the junk from it, the ats and that kind of stuff, and the .coms, and create a user ID. So in the cases where you have users with the same, that could end up having the same username based on the email address, they put numbers after it. But in general, you would be using this module on a site where user IDs, because they're required in Drupal, but you want to keep them in the background that the user doesn't really deal with them. And this module helps you do that. It kind of handles the whole registration process in terms of the initial registration and their account update page. It makes all the necessary modifications so someone can just use their email address to deal with Drupal.
Is there a reason? I guess my question would be, why don't you just use a submit hook to just make the username equal to the email? addressed. Is there a reason why you don't want that?
I'm not sure there's a this is basically what this thing is doing for you.
Oh, okay.
Like most modules, Nick, they're actually just implementing hooks in Drupal on things that you could do on your own. I mean, that's what they're mostly all doing. This is doing that for someone who doesn't want to write a hook to do that.
I suppose.
Yeah. All right. So I think that wraps up this week.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Anything else anyone would like to add?
Paragraphs is well worth checking out. Yeah. And if you want to go skydiving, that's a lot of fun too.
Jump, right?
Nick can talk to you about paragraphs on the way down.
Yeah, sure. All right, guys, thanks. And we'll talk to you soon.
See you.